back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and this is the final episode of our Disability, Equity, and Inclusion series that we are doing during the month of July, Disability Awareness Month. So I've been very, very glad to do this series. This is a cause that is very close to my heart as someone with a disability in my family, as someone who works in the disability field. And I am joined today by Olivia. I'm so excited to talk to her today because we also have some mutual interests in theater. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too. So for our more audience, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Olivia Mozzi. I work at Riley Children's Foundation on the communications team. So I work primarily with our Riley families, telling their stories. And for the purpose of this conversation, I am disabled. I have cerebral palsy, primarily walk with crutches. And about 10 years ago, I started speaking in the community about disability awareness and disability advocacy. I started with kids through the Joseph Maley Foundation, talking with their disability awareness curriculum for kindergarten through 8th grade and being a guest speaker for that program, and then started branching out because it's not just kids that need disability awareness. And my other passion is theater and accessibility in the arts. So I joined choir in 5th grade and never looked back. I've always loved performing, did shows in high school, classes in college, and then more recently, I've been in some community productions, and it's been a really wonderful platform to be able to not only talk about representation in the arts, because that was something, I've been talking about the entire time that I've been speaking in the community, but to also really embody it and show that, someone in our community and not just on Broadway can do it, and that local theater companies can be accessible and inclusive as well.
Right. That is something that has been definitely emphasized during the series, is just how important visibility can be.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing someone, loving someone with a disability, and then seeing them thrive in like a professional workspace, a personal space, the art space, like just how important and empowering that can be. You were telling me a little bit before we started rolling about a recent experience that you had, and we have seen people with disabilities on the Broadway stage. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, and then about this recent experience that you had being choreographed.
Yeah. So like I said, I have been a performer for most of my life. And growing up, I was fortunate to mostly meet people and teachers, especially, who were inclusive and wanted to adapt choreography for me. Oftentimes I would be in a wheelchair for choir concerts or school musicals, things like that. But then as I got older, started to meet more people who were a little less certain about how to include me and what that looked like to have somebody with a disability in theater. Because at that time, I didn't really have any disabled role models, particularly in the performing arts space, and representation was still pretty limited. So I have been really fortunate to see not only my engagement increase in terms of places I've been able to get involved and perform, but also that I've had more role models. So Ali Stroker, being a performer, was a huge change for me. I made a point of going to see her in her Broadway debut in Spring Awakening, because as soon as I heard, someone in a wheelchair is going to be on Broadway, like, this is something I have to see. Right. And it was really powerful to see the way that the other actors interacted with her, and they adapted little moments, which, if you weren't in that space, you didn't have a disability, you might not even notice it. But for me, it was like, oh, they can do this on Broadway. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And
it was a Deaf West production, right?
So it was a Deaf West production. So there were more people with disabilities on that stage than not, which was so cool.
Yeah. I love how the ASL they incorporate into the show. Like, it makes it so meaningful.
I took some ASL classes after that show because I thought, this is, it's a beautiful language. And being in the meet and greet line after the show, I would hand my playbill to the actors and I would, tell them like how much the show meant to me. But if the actor is deaf and I don't know ASL, there's only so much I can share with them. And I was like, I need to be able to communicate more. So I ended up taking ASL, which again is like another example of why representation is so important.
Right.
But yeah, so to be able to watch Allie in her career and, see her win a Tony. I had a friend who, her daughter, their whole family actually is into theater, and they were watching the Tonys together. And my friend was explaining to her daughter that, oh, Allie is the first person to play Ado Annie in a wheelchair. And her daughter's response was, oh, Ado Annie isn't always in a wheelchair? Because that was the first representation she was seeing, right? And I think it's such a good example of what we've always seen doesn't have to be how it always is.
Right.
And the more representation you have, the more people think that that's the way it should be, which it should.
It's been this way all along.
Right. Yeah. So watching Allie and then getting more involved in local theater. And I have had the privilege of both playing a disabled character and a non-disabled character, which both are incredibly important for representation. So if you are telling a story about a disabled person, it is a non-negotiable to have a disabled actor play that role. So I was able to be in a show called Cost of Living with American Lives Theater 2 years ago. And that character was disabled. And it was funny. So my character was paralyzed after an accident. So I used a power chair in the show. But the other disabled character in the show had cerebral palsy. And that actor was disabled, did not have cerebral palsy, but I would like coach him.
Yeah.
Different things of like, this is how you make this authentic. Which, I mean, to have that experience where, a lot of times I would be walking into theater spaces like, I don't know if I can be disabled in this space or how that's going to work. And then to have it be like an asset was really empowering.
Yes.
And then I went on to be with Footlight Musicals, and I was the first visibly disabled performer to be on their stage in a show called Bright Star. And that was just in March, which is wild. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience from audition through performance. I think I learned a lot and grew a lot as a performer. I think our cast and crew learned a lot. The choreographer actually thanked me in his bio, which I didn't know until after the fact, but I thought that was so meaningful. And yeah, I think it's been incredible to grow up and not only see the people that I look up to have more representation, and more people that I can look to and say, oh, this is what my career might look like in the future, but then also to literally embody that, and be that example for other people and for Indiana community theater, as opposed to Broadway, because it would be easy for people to say like, oh, of course they can do it on Broadway because they have money and resources and blah blah blah, but
Right.
You can do it anywhere. You can really do it anywhere. So
Yeah. As long as that's something that you're championing and that you want to work towards, it is absolutely possible.
yeah, I think it's really the mindset that is the most important thing. I mean, yes, the resources are important, and we're fortunate to have places. I borrowed a sports chair from the Rehab Hospital of Indiana and their adaptive sports program, to be in the show. So certainly we're fortunate to have those resources, but those resources are in a lot of places, and truly the mindset of we can do this is going to take you farther than anything else, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I've been thinking a bit about, the concept of masking when it comes to people with disabilities, and how it can be really different if, it's a mental disability versus a physical disability, and maybe what that looked like for you growing up, if you felt like you had to try to be more able in order to do the things that you wanted to do. Did you have any experience with that?
I didn't from that angle, just because, walking with crutches and, especially, my strength and stamina weren't what they were when I was a kid that they are now. So I didn't, it was pretty front and center that I was disabled. The interesting thing was during the pandemic, and being disabled because, you went to an all virtual world. And I quickly learned that if I was meeting someone, if I was, for example, presenting to a group, or if I was meeting like a new coworker, I'm used to my disability being the first thing that people notice about me when I walk into a room. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting right like where right now.
Right.
And people are only going to know if I'm disabled if I specifically disclose that to them. And I even had an experience where the first time I met one of my coworkers that had been hired on, I think at the end of 2020, we met for a walk. And at the end, she said, I don't want to be awkward about this, but I didn't know that you walked with crutches. And I thought, oh my gosh. Well, like, I'm glad you know now. Probably some of our conversations make a lot more sense, but,
Right.
and I know that was an experience for other disabled people too, or like online dating is another place where that comes up a lot. There's, debate about, or not even, I mean, it shouldn't even be debate, but there is debate about whether, you disclose your disability in your profile, whether you have pictures that show your mobility aids, that kind of thing. And I've even evolved in that space where I remember reading an article, and this was like a long time ago, but they were saying, oh, if you don't mention your disability, then but then you like reveal it later when people have gotten a chance to know you, then it will be less, I don't know, intimidating, and they'll be more likely to stay with you. But right, which I bought into at the time, and now I'm like,
Actually.
yeah. So now it's, I put it out there because if somebody is for whatever reason not willing to work through that with me, like I don't want to spend time with you in the first place.
Right.
And so, yeah, so I think in the virtual space is kind of when I've encountered masking, and is that a thing that I want to do? Or is it a thing that's naturally happening? And like I said, I have to or need to disclose that I'm disabled when I'm not used to doing that, because it's very obvious when you meet me in person.
And at the beginning of this conversation, I noticed that you said, for the purpose of this conversation, I am disabled, which, obviously we're talking about it. This is a series that we're doing, but there are spaces where you would be talking and it just wouldn't even be relevant. Like, it's just not an important detail. It's not something that you even would feel like you needed to disclose. So
yeah,
I don't know, do you grapple with like that being empowering versus feeling like maybe you should be saying it? Like, what is that experience like?
Yeah, I would say that feeling empowered as a disabled person is definitely a journey that I have been on. And I still have moments when, I hit ableism or microaggressions, and they hit me pretty hard. But I would say overall, I have grown a ton in being willing to be visible, and in seeing my disability as an asset that I can bring to the table in like a unique perspective, rather than something that I need to hide or, be ashamed of. I've had conversations of, oh, I hate being stared at. And then friends and mentors would help me see that, I'm naturally going to turn heads when I walk into a room because of the crutches, but I can also choose what I do with that attention. Whether it's simply living my life and not holding back because people are looking at me, and kind of demonstrating what my life is truly like as a disabled person, or being an advocate and saying, okay, if you're going to look at me anyway, I'm going to, make a presentation about disability history and disability rights and how you should include disabled people.
And also, let's be real, you're probably turning heads because you're beautiful as well. So,
oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it up for our Let's Talk More on Monday episode. So if you're listening to this, make sure to head on over to our Patreon. We're going to dig a little deeper with Olivia, talk about some tools and resources, why advocating is so important. So make sure to go and join us over there. If you do support us on Patreon, you are helping more continue our internship series where we help young women in the college spaces build their portfolios and learn how to make opportunities reachable for everyone. So we're very grateful to all of our Patreon subscribers. But thank you, Olivia, for joining me today. Is there anywhere that people can find you on the social spaces?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Olivia Mozzi. LinkedIn is a great place. I tend to share like more disability focused content there. And then if you want a mix of disability content with a lot of cute pictures of my cat and like great meals that I've had, you can follow me on Instagram. And that one is at VIAMIZZAI. It's a play on my name. So yeah.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners. We'll see you over on Patreon, and let's talk more on Monday next time. Bye.